net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
Hello and welcome back to the Integration Station. I'm Naturally Ashley, your host, here with a special guest, Jasmine Virdi. And one of the reasons why I was most inspired to have her on is that she's becoming pretty well known in the psychedelic space. She's been freelancing and working in collaboration with many people, a lot of organizations that you may know as well, like Synergetic Press, like Fireside, the peer-to-peer support hotline for psychedelic users. Also, what was the other one? Double Blind, and we've actually had Shelby on from Double Blind before, so a lot of you may have checked out that magazine as well. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass the mic over to Jasmine so she can give a better introduction as to who she is, what brought her to this space, and share a bit about her story.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having me on. And obviously, yeah, delighted to talk more about my work and what I get up to. And yeah, I think you described it quite well. I've been collaborating and freelancing in this space for a long time and with many different organizations over the years. And I'm a kind of person that loves to have my like fingers in many pies, so to speak. But yeah, I guess it all started for me. I was interested in psychedelics and plant medicines and moreover like ecstatic and mystical experiences from an early age. When I was about 14 or so, I was in some chat room online and someone asked me like, have you ever meditated? And I hadn't. And yeah, through that asking of a question, I stumbled across a book of a copy of Thich Nhat Hanh's The Way of the Buddha's Teaching, or The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching. And just reading that book was kind of like my first psychedelic experience, so to speak. And it really led me down this path of self-inquiry. And through studying about mysticism and spirituality, I really wanted to explore these states for myself. And obviously that was primarily through meditation. But eventually I decided I stumbled across someone talking about using LSD for spiritual purposes, and it really like tickled my curiosity. And I grew up in Cyprus. I'm a mixture of Indian, Cypriot, Italian, British, but I was born in Cyprus and I grew up here. I'm currently here now visiting my family, which is quite apt. But so yeah, growing up here, there wasn't really much access to these kinds of substances and plants. And so I just kind of had this idea of like, when I'm ready, they'll find me. And lo and behold, they did. And I had a really big experience in early 2014 that, I think different to many people. I went into, this experience with these very spiritual ideals. And I had this, just this framework of like, this is going to be a big spiritual experience. And it was much more than I bargained for. I took a very large dose, not really knowing what I was doing. And, I really advocate like, going slow and, starting at smaller doses and kind of getting more comfortable with these substances as you move forward. But I just kind of took a deep dive, plunged into the deep end, and I guess that kind of led me down this massive path of like wanting to work with psychedelics. And I will say it was a very beautiful, life affirming, but also very destabilizing experience. I did have a spiritual emergency, which I'm not sure if listeners know what that is, but there's a brilliant book where Stanislav and Christina Groff talk about spiritual emergencies. It's essentially like, I guess a spiritual experience that can be very destabilizing. And so it's a play on words. Spiritual emergence is a kind of more slow form of, you could say, spiritual awakening that happens more gradually, and a spiritual emergency is just kind of like full force. And it can manifest in many ways. It kind of like parallels psychosis or psychotic states in many ways, and people going through those states are they might describe like contact with spirit entities, have very vivid dreams, their energy levels might change. And it's not necessarily like only induced by psychedelics. I think people have them spontaneously or through big life experiences like giving birth or being in an accident. So it can be induced through trauma. But so I had one of these experiences, and it kind of threw me for a loop. And I just became kind of obsessed for a while of like, how can these substances engender such powerful experiences and elicit such powerful experiences? And for a long time, they became a large topic of inquiry for me. And so I started going to psychedelic conferences. I started looking for community in the psychedelic space and other like-minded people that I could talk about these experiences with. And I did my undergrad in linguistics, and I was like, graduating in 2017, looking for a job in English teaching, and I was just really heavy-hearted actually about applying for all these jobs. I was like, this doesn't resonate with me. And two of my best friends at the time, one was going to study neuropsychopharmacology, and the other was interested in psychedelic assisted therapy. And I was really interested in those things too, but I really didn't know like what my purpose was in that space. And so eventually I found Synergetic Press, who I still work and collaborate with. So Synergetic Press is a publisher that has been publishing books since 1984. Initially, they started publishing books around theater and poetry, and also Biosphere 2, which is a closed systems ecological unit in Oracle, Arizona, and then eventually spirituality, well, ethnobotany first, then more like spirituality and psychedelics. And so, it was this place, and my skills lie in language, I guess. So it was a kind of combination of certain skills that I had, and it just piqued my interest. So I guess I've been working with them or collaborating with them since 2018. And we publish books on psychedelics, ecology and sustainability, social justice, and I also freelance write, like you mentioned you mentioned Double Blind. So I write for them. I write for Psychedelics Today, just articles in general about psychedelics, psychedelic therapy, psychedelic culture. You name it. It's pretty expansive. And then I also teach, or rather facilitate, study groups for Psychedelics Today. They have a vital psychedelic training program. So I do that. And I've also been volunteering for Fireside Project, as you mentioned, which is a service based in the States that provides support via text and call to people seeking help in psychedelic related crises, as well as support for integration. So that's some of it.
Gosh, yeah, like I love you're like, well, that's some of it, but like there's a lot. This is a vast amount of things that you're dipping your feet in, and you're really encompassing, like making it a lifestyle. You found what you're passionate about, and you're surrounding yourself with it. It's a beautiful thing to share. I'm curious what you've learned in this time, like writing all these articles. What are your big takeaways? What are things that you're most passionate about out of the vast amount of subjects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really beautiful question. I think I've made a lot of my life around psychedelics and plant medicine. Like a lot of my work is orientated around talking about them or learning about them, educating about them. But I think a conclusion that I have reached is, one of them, which I think, yeah, in Ralph Metzner's words, like psychedelics are the medium and not the message. And I think that in my own work and in my own kind of philosophy around these substances, I believe that they are about more than healing. I think in the mainstream and in the discourses around psychedelics, especially those, portrayed in documentaries, in articles, in the media generally, there's a lot of focus on their medicalization and their like functionality as medicines. So we look at MDMA for PTSD or psilocybin for depression and end of life and anxiety. And I think, you know, I really like to look at the kind of mystical and transpersonal elements of these substances, plants, even, animal residues, all of these things. I believe that, yeah, that I think the narrative has become like really heavily focused on healing and trauma, but I think there's a lot to be said for that. I believe that they're useful for that, but also they're about so much more than that. And I'm really in favor of kind of maintaining nuance in our dialogues around these things, because I don't think that they should be substances that are strictly controlled by a medical community. I don't think that you need to be quote unquote like sick or unwell to benefit from them. I think that they can enhance meaning making for a person already living a quote unquote healthy life, or that is already happy in many ways. I think that they really help to build community and connection with nature, connection with the other, the transcendental other, whatever that may be, however one chooses to define that. And so, yeah, I think for me, they also, this emphasis on individual healing, something that I really like to emphasize is like, yes, they do help with that individual healing, but they remind us that we're a part of a collective. And, that individual healing really can't take place without the healing of the collective and vice versa. And so, at least within medical systems, the very idea of like, helping someone cure a mental illness is kind of like directed towards getting them to be like healthy and productive members of society again. And I feel like, yeah, personally, I'm like pulling away from that narrative. I think, away from at least the productive element of it. And I think that these substances and experiences, moreover, can make us more collaborative, kin-centric beings. And ultimately, there's a connection between ecology and, I guess, systemic issues that I think, like, an activism also that is so tied toward or tied together with the use of these plants and fungi and substances.
Yeah, you hit on a bunch of really important topics there. I love the whole thing about collaboration over competitions. And art name of an article I wrote long ago, but in your own life and how you've built your career and everything's a complete example of that. And it gives a lot of reverence to, I think, the plant medicines in your own journey and integration work too. just like feeling into that it is about community. It is about people coming together. You know, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you know, it's or where you come from or anything. It's just, you know, the things that bring us together. You know, it just changes that perspective a little bit. And I think a lot of people can relate to that have been working with these medicines. It definitely helps you change your mind, like Michael Pollan would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it helps you change your mind and also your way of being embodied and way of being in the world. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really in favor of practices in general and ways of being and ways of knowing that really allow us to erode this idea of ourselves as like bounded individuals. I'm a really big fan of a thinker called Sophie Strand, you know, and she often talks about just the bacteria in our gut and all of these things that are invisible that comprise us. And I really like, you know, I really like to marry like my thinking with about psychedelics and plant medicines with thinking about ecology and just knowings about the natural world, because I think that, you know, I don't think psychedelics will save the world by no means, but I think that they are catalysts that will help wake some people up to deeper connection with others and more meaningful ways of being and like you said, changing our minds.
You touched on something too, you know, that interconnectedness. When I was in nutrition school, I came across a movie series or a documentary series called Interconnected. And then later down the road, Dennis McKenna put on, I think it was the Symbiotic Symposium. It's like along these same lines that you were just mentioning before, how, you know, our gut is a representation of our soils and these things. But what's really great about the Dennis McKenna one specifically is he was bringing in how we work symbiotically with fungus and all these other psychoactive medicines, of course, from him. But there is that nutritional standpoint too, where you can look at it with like all different types of plants, you know, the herbs, adaptogens, nootropics, like everything. You know, that's really, we have been growing symbiotically with, and it's part of that remembering, you know, and that's where that change happens, is remembering that we are a part of nature. We're not separate from it, no matter, you know, how isolated, how rubberized our shoes are, no matter how much concrete there is in the cities, we are still a part of nature. And once we can remember that and kind of break down those walls, you know, it changes a lot of things in our lives and then in the world around us too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of like quote unquote like mental illnesses or disorders are kind of like just reflections of these unhealthy ways of living that we've adapted to or maladapted to, you know, just like being in big cities, like not having I think like loneliness is definitely an epidemic, you know, like not having those close connections with others. You know, I was reading about disorder the other day and like, you know, the effect on kids that has. And I mean, there's so many ways, like you were saying, the food we eat to, how that, just what kind of connection do we have to these like larger systems around us. And I don't know, for myself, when I think about integration as well, all of these different elements, you know, whether it be like somatic and bodily or mental, emotional, psychological, I guess relational domains of our personhood, you know, they're all avenues where we can really practice that message of connection. Or maybe it's not that message for some people, but I think there is a deeper sense of meaning that comes with walking through these through these doors and opening up these windows in our psyche or to the other, however you want to understand and internalize those things.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, thank you so much. So when it comes to just the integration work in general, what does that really look like, you know, or actually, do you know what? Yeah, let's go there first. The integration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that integration for me means really grounding those insights and learnings. Like it's kind of taking the mystical and grounding it in the practical. And I think that looks different for every person to some extent. And like I mentioned, these different domains like relational, somatic, emotional, mental, just kind of like observing ourselves on these different fronts. And like, yeah, maybe there are small ways that we can increment our behaviors to really reflect our values. And it's hard to think of just like psychedelic integration on its own, because I think that, yeah, to an extent, yes, during psychedelic experiences, you might have like certain insights or downloads, but I find it hard to separate that from the rest of life. Like we're always having insights and downloads about ourselves, and so yes, of course, you're integrating these maybe insights from a particular experience, but I think it blends beautifully into the rest of life. I think to an extent, we're always integrating, we're always healing. And yeah, like I was saying before, there's a part of me that, doesn't want to fully emphasize, or always emphasize, I should say, the narratives around trauma and healing. And so I also like to think of like us holding with a WH, like becoming more whole, incrementally as well. Like, what are we doing to become more whole and integrated as a person? And yeah, integration is a process of like iterative wholeness. So I kind of think of it as a spiral, but I think it's just an ongoing, lifelong thing. And I guess, yeah, when I think about like concepts like healing or enlightenment, there's this sense of like, I don't know, I don't believe there is a total healing or a total enlightenment, and I don't think there is a total integration either. I think it's sometimes you're more integrated, sometimes you're more in line with whatever it is you're trying to move towards, and sometimes you're not. And I think it's about being loving and compassionate with ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
with always new coming in, you're always, yeah, absolutely. All right. So on this note, I'm going to share our sponsors. I'm going to go plug in this laptop too. And I'll see you guys all back here in just a few minutes. And we'll have Jazz back. We will talk more about this integration, but I also want to dive into some of the other places where she's channeling her energy right now, and leave you guys with some cool tips and tools and things like that to help you on your own journeys too. So we'll see you right back here. And,
we are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com. CBG TV, broadcasting to a worldwide audience. Find us at cbgtv.com.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor. If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
PACE Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
Legacy 420 have an awesome array of cannabis-infused beverages, from pop to Nature's Nectar's teas, all in amazing flavors. What a selection! We even have a delicious mango-infused juice, and let me tell you, it's delicious.
Everything is infused in-house, so we buy our syrup from the same place where everybody else buys their syrup for their pop, and the infusion is done in the lab. It's all canned here, labeled here, produced 100% on Tyendinaga.
We have two lines of drinks. One's called our Nature's Nectar. That was our original line that we came out with, and then we also have a line under the Virdi brand. We have them in 10 milligrams, 30 milligram, and 60 milligram cans.
What a great selection for a get-together with friends or after a long day. Remember, if you want to wet your whistle with on-site lab-tested products, come see your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Hi, welcome back, you guys. It's very loud where I am, so I'm just gonna ask a question to Jazz, let her, take off on it, and mute myself. But the question for you is more around how it is that you've used writing and just your own entrepreneurship and ideas to help you integrate in your own journey. And also, I know you're going for medicine training and things now. What's that looking like? How's that fitting into the integration as well? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. For me, writing is something I've always loved. From, I still have journals of my own from when I was like 6 years old or something. It's something that I've always engaged with. And I think primarily, I've engaged with writing as a way to see myself. It's like free therapy essentially, and I've been doing it for years. And I guess when I started writing in writing in the psychedelic space, it just kind of happened organically. And once I started doing it, I really enjoy writing, and it came about kind of like naturally. And I kind of started in the pandemic as well. I had written a couple of articles before then, but I think with people just being online and, on their computers, people saw my articles more. And then, people kind of, wanted more content during that time. And I guess, it became a process. Like, writing is a way for me to think deeply or engage in a subject in a deep way and see it from all these different angles. And so I think that it's been really beneficial for my own process of learning in that way. And, in every piece that I've written, generally, I like to interview different experts. And so, I've always viewed myself as a kind of connector. I love people. I love to be social. I love to ask questions. And so it was beyond the writing, the process of having interviews with people and connecting with people. And because it was, peak pandemic, everyone had time to say yes to interviews as well. And so, I would just find myself in Zoom calls with people who I really respected and who were experts in their field, getting to pick their brains and ask questions. And then, kind of craft a piece that really interested me. And I'm really lucky that I had a lot of freedom from the people that I wrote for to just kind of be like, oh, I'm really interested in this particular topic. And they're like, okay, sure, write about it. Like, I'm really lucky that I had those kind of relationships. Yeah, and a couple of the pieces I wrote, like some of my favorites, I think one was for Psychedelics Today, exploring like the topic of children and psychedelics. That's one of them. Yeah, there was an early one about the default mode network and psychedelics. Yeah, I think for Double Blind, I wrote one about John Lilly and his explorations with dolphins and psychedelics. For those of you that don't know about John Lilly, he was a fascinating psychedelic researcher in the 60s who also became obsessed with dolphins. He invented what are they called, sensory deprivation tanks. And he became obsessed with dolphins because of the size of their brains, and did a lot of research trying to teach dolphins to speak English, which is really far out. And he essentially took a lot of ketamine and tried to speak to dolphins telepathically. But anyway, so yeah, it's just a fun way for me to learn about all of these different things that sometimes are more general, sometimes are more niche. But I don't know, I find a lot of meaning in that. And I guess with trainings, you know, I guess writing in this space for a long time, I've always really wanted to work with people. And I think that was really affirmed for me when I was working with Fireside, doing kind of peer support work. I get a lot of meaning from that. I get a lot of energy. I think, you know, it's a good use of my personal skills, what I bring to the table. And I think we all in this space, in any space as individuals, you know, we all have gifts that, you know, were given to us, or, you know, we also skills that we hone over many years. And so, you know, I'm also in the process of honing my space holding skills. And yeah, you know, when I realized I wanted to hold space for people on psychedelic journeys, you know, I feel like it's been a very gradual process. And I think a lot of people really rush into that work. They might have like a first medicine experience and like, this is what I want to do. And it's beautiful if you want to be in service in that way. But I'm a really advocate of like going slow. And so I'm really not in a rush to do that work. But I have over the last year done some really beautiful trainings. One was with the Beckley Academy, who, you know, I have so many good things to say about that course. And yeah, just the amount of kind of interpersonal growth that happened, at least between the group that I shared my time with. And yeah, teaching on Psychedelics Today's course, I, you know, obviously get to engage with a lot of that content. And I think that, yeah, it's, like I said, holding space is a skill that is cultivated over time. And you do that by being in relationship with others, you know, by practicing reflective listening, by you know, doing your own shadow work. And yeah, there are more kind of in-person hands-on trainings that I'd like to do at some point, but like I said, I'm not really in a rush going into those or going into that work either.
I like that you know, are still go with the flow, and you're like, you said it with the psychedelics too, and it's a total fractal of that, of like, go take it slow, you know, and what was it? Yeah, low dose and like and over time. And you're doing that in these other areas of your life too, where you're like, yeah, I have these goals, but it's okay to just go one at a time. And I think a lot of people who were establishing themselves during that time of COVID really understood that, about like really honing in on that foundation, taking that time. And it really shows just how far you can come by doing that, by just like not rushing yourself and allowing yourself to grow into where it is you're supposed to be, as long as you're in alignment, you know. And you've definitely shown that. Do you have any advice for anybody who's finding that they're passionate about some things, or just starting to find their place, but scared to, you know, just like go all in? Do you have any advice for that? listener today?
Yeah, I mean, it depends if they're particularly passionate about holding space, I think that really gaining experience, especially in the realm of harm reduction and peer support, can be really useful. I'm a big advocate of harm reduction work in general, and I think it's really important that, we destigmatize these substances also in recreational spaces. But there is so much to be learned from volunteering in those spaces. I think that you don't really know how it will feel until you're in it, and so it's easy to kind of romanticize this work, especially when you're moving in ceremonial worlds. I think that ceremonies can be so aesthetically and also aesthetically, visually, but also like they're just beautiful in so many ways. And I think that, like, obviously you come into contact with crises in these spaces, but when you're coming into a crisis in a recreational space, it can be a very different thing. And so you, like I said, you don't really know how you're going to feel about this work until you're in it. And if you can get experience through volunteering at a festival or for a local harm reduction organization, it's a really beautiful chance to understand more how, like, these substances work. There's a lot about drug education and, like, how different substances interact with one another, but also like practical steps to, like, how to support people going through these very, very vulnerable states, and also like being held accountable by a larger community of people who are doing the same work. And I think that, there's something to be said about community for any kind of work where you're holding people through vulnerable states. And I don't know, just having that community of practice. One, it's really important for kind of ethics and kind of doing this work ethically, because I think a lot of the people that I've spoken to, including myself, it's easy to look at ethical transgressions, like, and just think, oh, I would never do that. Like, and you just, like I said, you don't know until you're in it. And having people to talk about those experiences with, of like, oh, when I was holding space for this person, this particular thing happened and I didn't know how to deal with it, or I dealt with it in this way. Like, there's room for reflection from others, and there's room for self-reflection as well. And so I think it's really important for that, but also for one's own mental health. Also doing this work, I think it takes a lot of psychological and spiritual energy to do this work. And so just having others who are doing similar things to hold you in that. So I don't know, I really like the idea and the actuality of building communities of practice around this work, because to some extent there's a lot of gray zones around what you can and can't do in these spaces, and a lot of people are doing underground work, and it can feel a little bit like the Wild West. And so just finding a group of people who are doing something similar to whatever you're wanting to do or doing, and really like coming together every couple of weeks or something and checking in, I think that's so important. And I would say that's my advice, and like I said, going slow, like there is no real rush. I think that there can feel like a sense of urgency, because there's this feeling of like, oh my God, this changed me so much, and it can change things for other people. It can really help people in a big way. But I really think, like, in opening these expansive spaces up, we really need to be grounded and centered. And like, I'm a believer of like, you can only grow as high as your roots reach. And so like, I think the more rooted and grounded we are, and just kind of transparent and clear-headed about these things, it's really important. I think there's a lot of talk about ego death, and like, psychedelics and plant medicines induce states of ego death, but they also, cause ego inflation. And I think that sometimes after these big mystical experiences, yes, you experience an ego death, but then it might come back stronger, and you might have stronger convictions around certain things that you maybe hadn't or had before. And I think it's just important to like let the sediment kind of trickle back down and let the dust settle, so to speak, before taking drastic actions. And so, yeah, if you had a big plant medicine experience and you feel like this work is for you, like, amazing. Just go slowly, find teachers, find peers, find people that can hold you in that process of growth. And like, there's no real rush if you're going to do the work anyways. I think, integration, like I said, is like a multi-year, lifelong process. And so you don't have to get there immediately.
You touched on something really important there with ego death too, right? Because we hear this all the time. And Carl Jung, he talked about ego death as being a type of identity. Well, if we're taking psychedelics and the intention is to have an ego death or something, we're disattaching from that identity. Of course, we're going to go and try to like outreach for other things to identify with. And that's one of the things with our culture right now, right? Is everybody wants to identify with something, anything, all of the things. And what we really need to do is practice the non-attachment, that letting go, tapping into our own inner Elsa and just let it go. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, no, it's really funny what you mentioned, actually, because years ago when I was going through my own spiritual emergency process, like, I stumbled across this book. I forget the name of it exactly, but it is Collected Writings of Carl Jung on Kundalini and Kundalini Awakening. It's really a cool book. I recommend it. But and he talks about this kind of like destabilizing effect of those kind of awakening experiences. And one of the things that he says is kind of like what you just expressed, that where he's seen this kind of awakening or Kundalini awakening go wrong in people is when people like begin to identify with the divine and begin to identify with the numinous or transcendent other. And I think that that's what can happen in these experiences of ego death, and I've been there firsthand. Like, I've gone through this. I know, after my spiritual emergency, I obviously, ego fell away during that time, and I felt like I was died, reborn, experienced a state of deep bliss and union with God. But after that, like, there was a sense of like feeling almost that I was chosen. And I don't think that's a unique experience. I think many people feel that way, and that's part of how it was so destabilizing in a sense. I was like, I felt like I was an ambassador of the mushrooms, and they had chosen me, to be their earthly, communicator, or whatever, it was. And so there was almost like this, like, messianic tendency in myself to like, oh, I'm gonna become a shaman and I'm gonna like heal people. It was like about me doing that somehow. And like, it took a long time to like come out of that like very inflated place. And that was a process of like identifying with the divine, like thinking like, oh, that is me. But actually, I think that these things are impersonal in a sense. They belong to a collective or whatever they belong to, but they're impersonal. And I think that it's very dangerous to begin to identify with those kind of larger mystical experiences. And so, in that sense, like, with thinking back to that text on Kundalini and Jung, he really emphasizes that, like, to stay grounded means to just like have an experience, to witness it, to learn from it, but not to confuse oneself for that other. And I think that happens.
Absolutely, it happens. And I'm going to share like a direct experience I had recently. by synchronicity, I ended up with a lady from Mexico, works with Bufo, and so I sat with her, and I had a kind of Christ consciousness moment where, like, I was literally Jesus crucified on the cross, and you know, I could have like came out of that and been like, oh, I'm Jesus, I had Christ consciousness. But what I focused in on, what I realized is that what I had there was an opportunity to feel and experience that pain doesn't have to exist when you have love and that vibration. And also it showed me like that I could focus in, even if there is like pain and distraction and like people in the crowd, or even if you're being crucified, or like whatever those fears are, if you just like you look out, you'll find your focus. Because what I ended up seeing or visualizing in that moment, that I focused and sat with the love instead of like the idea that I was Christ or whatever. If when I sat with the love, what I saw was everything else drift away, and it was just like mother and son. It was like looking out at that, and it was like that was the moment that I took from it, not the other parts. But I understand without the training of like identify, non-identify, of like attach, like let go, like working through those stages of Kundalini and chakra work, that there could be like a form of attachment in another way. Like I love that story, but it's not like the same. Knowing that you can tap into it, knowing that those experiences are real and can be felt, that's where like the love and the lesson is. Not in like the identifying and like the holding on to that was real, like I'm the Christ reborn. Like, you know, these things, you know, because life's always going to test us, and part of life is humbling ourselves to that means like the let go. And yeah, I'm sorry I went off on a tangent, but I was hoping it was relevant.
Oh, it definitely is. And you know what's coming up for me is also that I think, you know, these kind of like messianic impulses and these experiences can be so destabilizing in this way, is because Western culture writ large doesn't have a framework really for mystical experiences. You know, they've been pathologized, they've been demonized, they've been I guess just misrepresented for so much of history, or modern history I should say. And I think that like we don't have a framework, we don't have good models. And so I think that that's part of the messiness that we sit with now, of kind of like how, you know, and that's why I think that, you know, integration is so heavily emphasized when we're talking about taking psychedelics in Western contexts. You know, I have Indigenous friends, and those Indigenous friends, like, you know, their use of peyote hikuri is so bound with their cultural identity that there is no need to feel like it's a separate thing. And so, you know, we have that of like, oh, these aspects of life are so divorced and siphoned off from one another due to years of kind of stigmatization, criminalization, you know, misinformation. And I think that, you know, just this want to kind of work with plant medicines and move towards these more holistic ways of being, like, you know, I think we have to kind of like decolonize. And part of that is also like changing the way that we understand mystical experience. And, you know, I talk about this in a lot, you know, within Western culture. Like when I was a child, I would have a bad dream and my mom would say, oh, don't worry, it's just a dream. But why? You know, like in many cultures, dreams are taken seriously and dreams are mystical states. And so, you know, there are so many non-ordinary states of consciousness that we just kind of write off and don't ascribe meaning to. And like when we do have these experiences within these frameworks, like we don't have models and we don't have culturally bounded ways of really learning from them. And so I think that, yeah, like I said, there's a messiness to that, and that's what makes it so destabilizing. You know, if you don't have well, even an understanding that a certain state of consciousness could exist, like, and then to experience it, it's mind blowing, it's mind changing, it's revelatory. And I think, like, in many other cultures, like, there are so many other states of consciousness that are considered normal and like culturally sanctioned and healthy. So, yeah, I think what you shared really brought that up for me as well. The lack of, yeah, reference for mystical experiences and how to hold them.
Yeah, it's really important working with these medicines to remember those things, like to have respect, to have reverence. Like, it's not like something to exactly like just be played around with, though they can be entertaining and, you know, they can be fun and bring a lot of love and things like that. They are like also these entities and these spirits, and they bring with them like knowledge and wisdom from like way before us, you know, way before those we're even recollecting their stories from, you know. There's a lot here that can be unpacked in all different ways, from like health to spirituality to like just radical presence in this moment and being who we are and figuring out, you know, that whole thing, you know.
Yeah, I even think about recreational context as opposed to, like, you know, ceremonial plant medicine context as well, because I think that, yeah, humans have also, you know, wanted to modify consciousness, you know, since time immemorial. And I think that that is also, like, there are so many reasons for that as well. And like, I think that, like, I don't know, I'm sort of advocate is the right word, but like, I'm in favor of like a celebration of all these different uses of, whether it be like spiritual or whether it be recreational. And I think that, you know, one can have recreational experiences also, maybe not with the same degree of reverence necessarily, but there can be reverence in those. And there can also be like a healthy, you know, a healthy way to use substances recreationally. And that's why I really love harm reduction as well, as a model. But I think that, yeah, it just feels important to kind of mention that, yeah, humans have been, you know, wanting to change their consciousness in different ways for hundreds and thousands of years. And so that's also like a normal impulse. Yeah, and, you know, so many different things, if used like in the right way, can be mind opening and heart opening and playful also.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know, it just goes to like show the power of these things. Like, it's far beyond even what we know. It takes like that direct experience and also the time to sit with yourself following the experience to really integrate that, get the most out of, you know. One of the questions I actually ask, like after people do retreats when I'm doing the integration work, I always am asking them, okay, like, what brought you here? Like, what was your intention for the night? And then how did it actually go? And then I'll help them like create, you know, some next action steps. But it takes knowing, like, why were you there, checking in, and then also whatever it is that you can get from the experience, because sometimes it's hard to take home everything. You know, sometimes it takes a while to even understand or be able to vocalize what's happened, because it is a language of no words in a sense. But yeah, having the time or taking the time to sit with those things and then taking the time to actually do the work afterwards, that's what's going to get you to those bigger answers of, you know, where am I? What's like actually my work here to do? You know, how can I make the most of this life? How can I celebrate the best in a healthy way? And, you know, have friends and family to celebrate with too. You know, these beautiful things that bring us joy in life and bring us connection and bring us love.
Yeah, I'm definitely an advocate for slowing down. I think I've mentioned that in like different domains. And I think that, yeah, also like expectation management when it comes to these experiences is so important. And I think that, you know, through my work in harm reduction, I've seen that actually, yeah, like that's when things can, you know, be very emotionally and psychologically difficult for people as well. Like speaking with people on the line who've had experiences maybe of, yeah, especially like, you know, buying into narratives in the media talking about psilocybin being an effective treatment for X, Y, and Z, or whatever it may be, whatever substance, just having these big, big expectations of like, I'm going to take this substance and it's going to heal me. Just having this framework of like, it's kind of like a magic bullet, and thinking about how like traditional, drugs work in pharmacology, like if people are taking SSRIs, there's this sense of like, oh, I'm going to take this and feel instantly better. And I think that, yeah, I mentioned the word messy, and I think that healing is messy in general. And just these expectations also can be, well, yeah, really painful and damaging in that process. Speaking to someone who had a lot of hope in taking a substance that would make them feel better, for whatever reason they're not feeling great, and finding that maybe they feel better in the beginning, but like a week or two later they're even more depressed than they were to start with, and they're having to deal with all of these memories that are re-traumatizing or somatic experiences. And so just kind of like understanding as well that, I think that I'm in favor of like evolving our language as well around how we speak about psychedelics and plant medicines. I think we say that we use drugs, or we use ayahuasca or whatever it may be, or take. And I think that like I really, even a shift to like encounter or collaborate, because I think it gives, whether you believe these plants, medicines, fungi are like spirits or entities, or whether you don't subscribe to that view, I think it just takes away of like the agency of the other. And like I said in the beginning, like I think it's like, I kind of really like to view the world as like a world of relations essentially. And I think that when we collaborate with mushrooms, when we encounter mushrooms or whatever we might be engaging with, that there is like a reciprocal relationship that is unfolding. It becomes a dialogue. It's no longer a one-way thing. And however you choose to conceptualize that, whether it's spirit or just a molecule, it's up to you. But I do think there is this kind of like back and forth that can happen. And opening ourselves up to that, I think, has to do with like, really managing our expectations as well. Of like, well, what can I bring to this experience? How can I show up differently? What are my questions? What actions can I take to really facilitate this process or play this role in my own journey to healing or wholeness, or whatever we want to call it.
I want to thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing this beautiful conversation. Please let everybody know how they can contact you or find some of your work.
I tend to post most of my work on my Instagram. So it's JAZZ.VIRDI, jazz.Virdi. And I think for now that's probably the best way to find me. I always say these things with website coming soon, but it really, really is. So, I do have a link in the bio, and it's got links to other talks and articles and offerings. So, for now, that's the best place.
Thank you so much. I'd love if you could stick around after the show, but I'll do the closeout now, and we'll see you in a little bit, Jess. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. Thanks, everyone. What a joy.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponic shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit